Hi, and welcome to Career Mobility with James Mcilvena. It's May already, James. How are you?
I am doing really well, and we know it's May because it's starting to get cold, wet, and windy.
It certainly is. It was 8 degrees on the walk this morning. So today we are going to speak about a few things. We know that obviously when you're in career transition, recruitment is something that you have a big focus on. So we're going to talk about recruitment today, aren't we, James? And also candidate experience, because again, it's a conversation that I end up having a lot with people. So we're going to talk about that. And also things about talent communities, talent pools, what's happening out there at the moment. So James, in your conversations with HR execs at the moment, what are you hearing out there on the grapevine about specifically about recruitment at the moment?
Yeah, so there is almost two speeds when it comes to recruitment in the current market.
Mm.
Speed one is where there is an overabundance of candidates and less roles in the current market. And so they're reporting this significant increase in applications per vacancy.
Yeah.
And the second speed is still this underlying segment of roles where they're critical talent for their organization. There's still an underrepresentation. So they could look down a list as an HR exec and say, I've got pockets where I've got recruiters saying that they can't keep up with the application demand. We're seeing a drop off in regards to candidate experience, and that's frustrating.
Yeah.
And yet I've still got some hiring managers in other segments saying, yeah, these are strategically critical roles. And yes, there are applications, but still not enough suitably qualified applications for me to build out my team and develop on the business strategy. So, and as we've talked about in the past, I've spent a lot of my career working in and around recruitment. And it's probably this dichotomy between those two
Yeah.
is at the greatest level I've ever seen it. And so that links to HR execs thinking differently to some of those themes you just referenced in your introduction about, the way we've done it. And let's face it, by and large, recruitment and the way it's done, yes, it's evolved, but has it fundamentally changed in the last 30 years? Not really.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about sort of going back to the beginning of my career, I remember having yellow cards, and it was all paper based. And, I think it's just the systems absolutely have changed. And, when we look at the sort of whole ATS applicant tracking system process, and, we talk to keywords a lot in recruitment these days, or recruiters do. Yeah, the systems have changed, but you're right, the process in actual fact hasn't changed very much. And I think one of the things that is perhaps the biggest concern is, as you've just said, recruiters and TA, teams aren't necessarily finding the talent that they're looking for, but also the candidate experience is also still not where it needs to be. So, what are your thoughts on how that can be changed? And what are you seeing that HR execs are sort of starting to look at as perhaps solutions to that?
Yeah. So one of the big things you've just mentioned, it's the systems, and in particular, the ability to use new tools like automation, generative AI, which
Yeah.
is why the keyword search is so critically important. The ATS is back from, and I too started when it was paper-based, and now if you're a recruiter, just for anyone who doesn't know who's listening to this, now as a recruiter, and it's been 5 years since I was out of working directly in a recruitment function.
Mm.
But even 5 years ago, as a recruiter, you would get a list and it would have your 100 applicants, and based on the pre-screening question or the overlay around the algorithms that looked at the keyword search,
Mm.
I'll get a list for my role, and let's call it MD of LHH, and that list would have the 100 applicants, and they would have either a percentage rating or they would be stack ranked, and it would
Yeah.
have TJ at the top, and it would have, and based on all these criteria. And so this is why when we talk about branding, keyword search, those type of things, they're so critically important. But
Yeah.
ultimately, that's just productivity and efficiency in how recruiters can actually sort more quickly. Before I even get into it, and I don't think it's a benefit for today's discussion, the fact that there can be inbuilt biases, it doesn't see the true person, it assesses in a lot of instances the productivity or efficiency and how they assess and stack rank people.
Yeah.
isn't necessarily always a true measure and the right thing when it comes to finding best talent for an organization. But
Mm.
the candidate experience bit, which was the query question, has been denigrated by that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
people are feeling there's less personal connection. I hear it time and time again
Mm.
from clients in our programs that I talk to, that they say, if I just had the opportunity to speak to someone, I think I could get a dramatically different result. But my frustration is I don't get to that point. And if I could get to that point, I still back my experience, my confidence, the fact that my marketing positioning statement is prep like, but if I can't share that,
Yeah.
then it's a real issue. So there's always a multifaceted way to get through it. And I think the frustrations are building on both sides around the fact that automation is not necessarily delivering exactly the level of outcome that the organizations want. And it's really hard to then try and balance out a way to not water down or make much less personal the experience as a candidate for advertised selection.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing as well, aren't we, that teams in sort of TA and even recruiter teams have contracted, particularly, there's been a lot of change in that segment in the last 18 months, particularly, which means they're very lean. There's not as many people there. So even from my perspective as a connector and a someone who's promoting talent all the time, actually, even for me to find the right people to connect to who've got the time to have those valuable conversations is getting less and less. So things like our employer spotlights and those sorts of events are becoming even more important, because there's a real opportunity to speak to someone who's a real life person in that organization or from that agency that actually can give you their time in that spotlight to really talk about what they're doing in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are absolutely right on that point around over the last 18 months, the majority, not all, but the majority of talent acquisition teams have leaned out. So there are
Yeah.
less people in those teams than what there was 18 months ago.
Yeah.
Yet the total number of roles has dropped. Yet the total number of applications might not have necessarily dropped in the same way. And so looking for different ways to get things done. And so, sourcing teams and talent pools and talent communities and those type of concepts, they're not new. They've been around
Yeah.
for 10 plus years. But one of the things that is often the first thing to go in talent acquisition teams, because it is less directly linked to a job workload of X recruiter has their 32 roles on the dashboard to fill. One of the first casualties of reductions within, in particular, internal talent acquisition teams is that sourcing functionality and the ability to sort of proactively outreach and
Yeah.
to engage, unless they're engaging through things like talent connectors, but it's pretty rare, right? It's one of the
Mhm.
things that we always talk about to our customers, that our ability to actually utilize looking after the environment with automatic lighting. I clearly wasn't talking with
I
my
love that.
hands enough. Maybe I need like be more expressive.
You need more jazz hands,
Yeah,
James.
just uh, so the ability to actually figure out ways to actually get people connected is
Mm,
critically important, because it is
yeah.
getting tougher to make that breakthrough, to get that in-person discussion, and how you position yourself and the healthy balance of what
Yeah.
is going to work best for you, for your personality type, your industry, your skill set. There is no one size fits all, but considering a healthy and balanced approach is going to be critical.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we always talk about, I think the more proactive you are in this process, the more connections you're going to make, the more you're going to learn. And I mean, when I'm speaking to people, particularly about how to approach the market, it's really about having conversations. I call it, networking needn't be awkward or uncomfortable. It's really about having conversations and building relationships. If you keep it into those simple things, it makes it very simple. But also then, the different tools that we offer from LHH and the structures. Again, this is something we eat every day for breakfast. Literally is that sort of, the marketing plan make sure you've got that. I'm going to put some resources into the the details after this session, but make sure you've got that plan, but then also that you use it when you're out and about talking to people. Because I think it's really important that people, when you're networking with them, James, can see that you're active and proactive in your own search.
Absolutely. And the other thing I would add to that is it's the resilience of knowing that, just because it doesn't work for a particular outreach could be for a myriad of different reasons. Not that approach is not an approach worth continuing and following. And then the second thing is continuing to adapt and refine and improve. So, when you have your elevator pitch, your marketing plan in place, that's not it. It's not set and forget, and that's part of the dialogue that we expect people are having with coaches, and they're refining for themselves. It's like, oh, that resonated particularly well. But like everything, balanced diet, don't over rely on one particular thing, because I know when I'm out speaking with people, you can take on board because something has landed particularly well once and then over rely on that. And actually, in reality, it just landed well with that person. But the next person you're speaking to has different drivers, different objectives. And so over focusing on any one particular thing just because it's worked well once is a danger. So that's why the structures are so important. Following the structures, being resilient and adapting and evolving as you go and you learn from each interaction, each experience. And much like generative AI, it doesn't improve and it doesn't learn unless it runs through multiple cycles. So you can't possibly know an outcome of how to refine and get your pitch right if you're not proactive and having a lot of discussions or a lot of interactions.
Yeah, I call that the Hansel and Gretel effect. It's the following of the breadcrumbs. Make sure, the more intel you pick up, I mean, even for myself, it's, it enriches every next conversation. So you bring the different breadcrumbs with you, and it's amazing, what you can actually, you then become somewhat the expert in what's going on out there. And that's also quite refreshing for people that you're networking with, if they're learning from you as well. So that's definitely important. There's a number of things, obviously, that we do and that are available in various programs that we offer through that career transition process. The other thing, I think is very beneficial is, obviously, if you are working or know other job seekers, certainly our job search work teams for those that are eligible for those, very, very beneficial executive job search work teams as well. Really offering that environment to share intel. Sometimes when I talk to people who are in recruitment, it's like, who are going through the process, it can be really frustrating when you go to a meeting but you don't feel like you learned something that was useful for you. But think about what you did learn, and actually that could be useful for someone else that you're talking to. And that's the reciprocity opportunity as well. Share intel and you'll be surprised, maybe they pick up something that helps you next time. So but you have to, as you say, be proactive and be having the conversations in order for those kind of magic moments to happen.
Yeah, and look, it's the nature of communities, right? It's the give to get and vice versa nature of how the dynamics of these things work. And so I like it's the first I've heard the Hansel and Gretel thing of following the breadcrumbs. I like it because it's actually a really good way to sort of visualize, finding a pathway to a destination, and each bit is seemingly only one small breadcrumb, but if you don't build and follow the trail, you're actually not going to get to the destination. I think the other thing, while we're on communities, and you mentioned it at the top of the call, is actually just what has changed around, whether we call it talent communities, whether we call them talent pools, but how they fit into everything. And I know it's something we constantly encourage people to do, is to spend the time and get involved. But one of the other things, linking back to the discussion we had at the start, is I'm seeing a genuine shift towards people wanting to better understand how they can actually engage with people, not on a job by job basis.
Yeah.
So applying for a role, if you think about the majority of, well, let's talk about a healthy level.
Yeah.
If you, and depending on who you are and your role type, but if you've got one job application and you're waiting around to find out what the outcome of that job application is, and
Yeah.
whether that was through a job board or whether that was through a networking event, but most people should have in excess of 5, even at a senior level, irons
Yeah.
in the fire at any given time. Now, the less senior the level, the greater the number.
Yeah.
But on the side of the recruiters, HR execs, they're thinking, if 4 or 5 of those roles are with my company, there's a clear lack of productivity and efficiency in the fact that you might be dealing with 2 different recruiters at the
Yeah.
larger employers for 2 different roles with 2 potentially very different outcomes,
Yeah.
versus actually better understanding the individual
Mm.
and
Yeah.
then being able to approach the individual for the right role versus the individual not necessarily knowing enough about your organization and applying for the wrong role that they're not fully qualified for, and therefore they don't get through the algorithms and they never receive a call back. So one of the innovations or interesting things is the evolution of talent pools having come a long way from put your name in, hope for the best, and most people's experience was never hear back.
Yeah.
And so the discussion is mostly around how do we make sure that it is a more pre-assessed group that is active, which then means the recruiters are saying, I find value in using my time.
Yeah.
This is the most effective way for me to reach that individual about the role that best fits them versus hoping that they land in our organization through one of the 4 roles they applied for in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Now, there's no one size fits all answer to this, and it's probably looked at more intensively in areas where there's talent scarcity right now.
Yeah. Agreed.
But my takeaway from having said all of that is absolutely, as part of your balanced job search diet, make sure you're actually across and considering talent communities, talent pools, because with everything I mentioned at the start around how the dynamics are changing, this is
Mm.
going to be an increasing area where it can serve the dual purpose of efficiency in finding the right person for the right role for the organisation and a better candidate care experience versus just more applications and more processing and more automation, but still the same thousands and thousands of job applications for successful outcomes.
Yeah, it's interesting, James, as you're saying that. I think, I mean, LinkedIn doesn't necessarily work this way, but I think when you see people's profiles and can see the richness of the individual's experience, how their voice, what they're posting, what they're engaging with, there's so many sort of facets to a candidate or an individual that you can see as a result of LinkedIn. When I talk to people about their career, if an artist has a portfolio of work that they can come and show and they can present, we also as professionals can do that within LinkedIn. So there are different communities where you can do that. And I was also thinking about industry associations. Some of those do that very well in terms of actually representing their kind of talent within that sort of talent pool almost, or that community, and actually work really well again with reciprocity within within those organizations to actually sort of source and sort of almost share sort of that talent pool. So yeah, I agree with you. Because we work, James, across so many different industries, it definitely isn't a one size fits all. And it has to be right for your job search, which is why it's so incredibly valuable to work so closely with your coach.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we might wrap up on that unless there's anything else you'd love to say.
No, I think that's we've covered exactly what we promised at the start, and I will sort of finish with what I normally say. If there's any specific topics people want to hear
Yep.
about, anything you'd like you and I to go into in depth, make sure you provide the feedback, and we'll make sure that we can cover it in a future monthly update.
Fantastic. And actually next month, of course, will be June, year end. So it's going to be, some interesting sort of time around that. We'll sort of see what's happening out in market and bring some more career mobility insights next month.
Yeah, new financial year, or new Australian financial year
Australian financial year, yeah.
often means new budgets. It often means new headcount objectives when it comes to, and it often means the ability for hiring to get freed up a little bit. So as I sign off, now's a really important time to consider before organisations hit June 30 around how you're positioning yourself, particularly if you're aware of the fact they run a July 1st new cycle from a budget and a positions perspective.
Brilliant insight. Awesome. All right. Well, take care. Have a great month, and I will see you next month.
Brilliant. Thanks, TJ.
Cheers, James.